You know, whether you're talking about the marble forms of ancient Rome or the big, shiny skyscrapers we see today, every great power has this one thing in common. They all believe they're the exception to the rule, that they're going to last forever. But history tells a very, very different story. It shows us a pattern, one that seems to repeat over and over and over again.
Yeah, this idea right here, it says so much, doesn't it? It's all about ambition, a little bit of arrogance, and this idea that history just moves in cycles. This is really our jumping off point for a deep dive into the rise and the inevitable fall of the world's greatest powers.
So, what is this pattern? Well, you can pretty much boil it down to four stages. First, you've got the ambitious rise. Then comes the peak, the glory days. But then, and this is the crucial part, they make the big mistake, overreach. And that leads almost inevitably to the final stage, the slow, sometimes quiet decline. Let's actually see how this plays out in the real world, starting with the OG, the original blueprint.
Yep, we have to start with Rome. I mean, it's the classic case study, right? The original blueprint for building an empire, and for how it all comes crashing down. The way it unraveled gives us lessons that, honestly, are still echoing today. And the contrast is just, wow, it's so stark. On one hand, you've got everything that made them great. Unbelievable discipline, really smart conquests, and they were always innovating. But on the other hand, well, that's where you find the seeds of their own destruction. We're talking arrogance, deep corruption, and just endless wars. And to pay for all that, they started debasing their currency, mixing cheaper metals into their coins so their money was worth less and less. Their legions were stretched way too thin, and the whole idea of the Republic just kind of rotted from the inside. Does any of that ring a bell? Okay, let's jump forward in time a bit, about 1,000 years, give or take. We land on the Spanish Empire. Now, their story is a really critical lesson in what happens when a country gets confused, when it thinks having a ton of money is the same thing as creating actual, real value. So Spain was just swimming in gold and silver from the New World. I mean, on paper, they were unbelievably rich. But here's the problem. While they were so focused on shipping all that shiny metal home, they forgot to actually make anything. Their own economy back home just stagnated. It rotted from the inside, which led to insane inflation, crippling debt, and, you guessed it, collapse. They were a nation rich in gold, but totally bankrupt when it came to real, sustainable growth.
All right, our next stop is the British Empire. Now, this one was a totally different animal. It wasn't just built on conquering land, it was built on trade, on industry, and on a navy that ruled the seas. And for a while there, it really looked like they had cracked the code, like they'd perfected the formula for ruling the world. But, as this timeline makes pretty clear, even they couldn't escape that same old pattern. After they hit their absolute peak, two absolutely devastating world wars just bled the treasury dry. The whole mood of the world shifted, colonies started demanding their freedom, and then came the final nail in the coffin. The pound sterling, which was the currency everyone in the world trusted, lost its top spot. And just like that, an era was over. And that, of course, brings us to today. As London's power faded, Washington's rose to take its place. The United States picked up the torch, becoming a new kind of empire, one built on dollars, on data, and on military dominance that the world had never seen before. And the parallels to what we've already seen, well, they're kind of hard to miss. Think about it. Where Rome had its legions marching across continents, today America projects its power with massive aircraft carrier strike groups, basically acting as the world's police. It's the same idea, global military reach, just with, way better tech. And remember what we learned from Spain about wealth? Well, the US dollar isn't backed by gold anymore. It's backed by the world's faith in it. This lets the US essentially create wealth out of thin air. It's an incredibly powerful tool, for sure, but it also has this eerie echo of Spain's reliance on a form of wealth that wasn't connected to actual production. And then there's the British parallel. Just like the Royal Navy once secured trade routes all over the planet, the United States today maintains this huge network of military bases everywhere. It's a global police force, really, meant to keep order and stability. A role that's, as you can imagine, both immensely powerful and eye-wateringly expensive. And speaking of expensive, that cost is a huge part of this story. This chart right here, showing the national debt just climbing and climbing, it's a really stark picture of that expense. This is one of the classic symptoms of imperial overreach. It's basically a sign that the bill for being the world's superpower is starting to come due.
So all these things, the carriers, the dollar, the global bases, I mean, they're all symbols of incredible, undeniable strength, right? But the pattern of history tells us we have to look deeper. We have to ask, what's really going on beneath the surface? And when we do look, we start to see some familiar cracks forming. That soaring debt we just saw is a big one. But it's not just that. There's also this deepening social and political division, and a growing lack of faith in the very institutions that are supposed to hold the country together. These are the exact kind of internal fractures that weakened all those other empires we talked about. So, if the pattern holds true, what comes next? Well, history tells us that empires don't usually go out with a big bang. It's not some huge, fiery explosion. The decline is normally much quieter, much slower. It just kind of happens as the rest of the world evolves and changes around it. And what typically follows an era with one single superpower is something experts call a multipolar world. It's a fancy term, but all it really means is a system where power isn't just in one place anymore. It's shared between a bunch of major countries or blocs, and each one has its own influence, its own ambitions. And you can already see the major players stepping onto this new stage, can't you? You've got China's unbelievable economic engine. You've got Russia, which refuses to be pushed to the sidelines. You've got India's growing ambition on the world stage, and the huge, huge potential of the African continent. The global chessboard is basically being reset as we speak. And this all brings us back to the central idea, the core lesson from this whole historical pattern. In the end, it's not usually about some foreign enemy breaking down the gates. It's about internal decay. It's about the choices made in government buildings, the numbers on bank balance sheets, and just the general mood of the people. Empires, they fall because of themselves. They fall from within. And so we're left with this one big question. Every single empire thinks it's special, right? That it's the one that's going to beat the odds and rewrite the rules of history. Rome had its Caesars, Spain had its kings, Britain had its vast empire, and America is having its moment now. The real question isn't if this moment will end, but when that echo of power finally fades away, what or who is going to rise up and take its place?